course, thank you. Good. Well, the introduction was lovely there. So thank you very much. I'm Dean. Sorry, I'm Dean. I'm as you said, lots of different names for the MVPs that I've got. Intune being one of them, interoperability being the other, security is another one. MVP essentially means that I share lots of stuff with the community. I do sort of YouTube videos and that kind of thing, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of that. Essentially, I've got too much time on my hands, so I make videos about the stuff that I find interesting. So I'm a certified trainer, which helps because I also do videos and training content on Pluralsight and Udemy, and I do try and do YouTube structured content as well, but it's not really a platform for that. I'm a speaker in the sense that I give talks like this to people like you, but I'm more on the technical side than the speaking side. So you'll probably notice that as we go through. I'm not a speaker. I'm a techie. So a bit about my history then. I started out as a desktop support technician at a games company in Cambridge, England. I spent the majority of my time there kind of trying to figure out how to make Microsoft Deployment Toolkit deploy Vista using the power only of Ask Jeeves and Yahoo. So if any of you are that old, then you'll understand my concern. Anyway, so this is the Defender user group, I'm reassured, and that's an incredibly large topic. So I thought, why not try and cover the entire thing within 30 to 35 minutes? So let's see how this goes. This could be an interactive session. I'm quite happy for you to interrupt me with any questions. Dan mentioned, put your hand up and put your question in chat. If you feel comfortable enough just to unmute and shout, then fine, go ahead and do that. I don't mind being heckled, but otherwise please stay on mute just for the sanity of other people who are listening. I don't have my audio on very loud, so other people who are listening to me might be interrupted if there's rustling in the background or that kind of thing, or chatter. So please please mute yourself for that reason mainly. Okay, just going to try and move my slides. Give me a second. And I don't know if anyone can see. Okay, good. I've got a big banner across the top, which is covering half my slide, but that's Teams for you. Right, so Defender XDR is what I would refer to as Defender. Now, this topic is the A to Z of Microsoft Defender and Defender everywhere. There are lots of different types of Defender, and they're across the top there. There's Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud, and there are more, and we'll go into that in a minute. But I wanted to just focus on the things that are within this each of these topics. So, for example, Defender for Endpoint is mainly consisted of endpoint detection and response, web content filtering, threat and vulnerability management, endpoint data loss prevention, endpoint DLP. Now, I've picked those. It's much bigger than that. I've picked those as the main things that I really think about when I talk about Defender for Endpoint. It's also the things I'm going to demo, so that's why they're also there. But that's pretty much how you can consider Defender for Endpoint. Hopefully you've come across this before. You maybe know what it is. You may be using it in your environment, but there it is. That's what I've decided to talk about. Next is Defender for Office. You may have come across this in the past: safe attachments, safe links, anti-phishing, attack simulation training, if you have access to that through the licensing you've got. A quick note on licensing then: all of this is available within either an E5 or an E3 subscription, a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 subscription. Majority of it is going to be E5, and I've had to get an E5 trial just to go through this talk with you, so you might find that some of it's available, some of it's not, but certainly this is a good idea of things that we can cover. So aside from Defender for Office and Defender for Endpoint, we've got Defender for Identity. This is domain controller security, things like honey tokens and high-value target identification. Now, I can't see the audience, but I'm interested in how many people actually use Defender for Identity, because for me, not enough organizations use it. But is there a way that you could just raise your hand if you use, or raise your hand or put some kind of thing into chat if you do use Defender for Identities, so we can get so that's 2. I can see that 3, 4 out of fully used 7. All right, on the roadmap. Cool. So quite a lot. That's more than I expected. We're going to cover it a little bit in this talk anyway, and it won't take too long for us to get there, so that should be fine. Okay, so Defender for Cloud Apps. This is software as a service security posture management. And it used to be called Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security, but I've left Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security on the slide there because that still exists as a subset of Defender for Cloud Apps. And Defender for Cloud Apps really is a way of managing what users can do within their cloud app. A cloud app being Office on the web or SharePoint, OneDrive, Dropbox, Box, LinkedIn Learning, all those different ways that users can access corporate information. We can control that. We can monitor it. We can look at it and see what they're doing on it, and protect them when they're doing that. Next, we have Defender for Cloud, and there's a list. Someone got a little bit crazy when they started naming defenders, and they just picked the thing that it does. So Defender for DevOps, Defender for servers, storage, SQL, containers, app service, APIs, Key Vault, DNS, Azure, Cosmos DB, and then they went a little bit mad and thought, we can't think of a good name for this one. Let's just do open source relational databases and stick Defender at the start. So that's the entire Defender stack. As far as I'm concerned, there's more to it. There's much more to it. And as I've seen just preparing for this talk, the deeper you go in each of these topics, you find more and more things that are interesting or you didn't know. Certainly for me, I didn't know a lot of these things. So there's a lot of depth to each of these products as well. They're not just names on a slide. So all of that does round up into the capability of sending it to a SIEM. So in this case, Microsoft Sentinel is the one I've got on the slide because it's the one I'm familiar with. But you can send all of the alerts and the information you get from these products up into Sentinel. So I mentioned I work for a games company. Now it wasn't a games company. It wasn't what's the name of that games company you made Age of Empires? Forget the name of the company now. Microsoft, but there was another one. Anyway, Age of Empires was a fantastic game back in the day. I used to play it on dial-up. Actually, I used to have to plug in my phone and do dial-up on 56k in order to actually get online and play multiplayer. Brilliant. But let's look at a scenario based on Age of Empires. So one of the things that we consider when we're doing security is that we need to figure out what the attacker is going to do in order to protect against that. So you can see we've got a pot of gold on the right hand side there, and we have the traditional attack path that the attacker might go for. So we've put our big wall up there, which is things like next generation firewall, intrusion prevention system, the usual stuff that we do to protect our assets. Then we've got our army, we've got a big chunk of rocks, and then we've got the gold. And hopefully the attacker doesn't get through. That's traditional on-premises, pre-COVID security, as far as I'm concerned. The issue is that now we've moved, not only have our users moved outside of the office, which is that top path, all of the stuff they access has also moved outside of the office. So it's no longer good enough to just protect the office. So we now know that attackers will choose the path of least resistance. And that means they're not going to go that way. They're going to go a different way, in this case, through the clearing. And that is a brilliant way to do it in Age of Empires, by the way. You just kind of use some kind of thing to knock the trees down on the bottom path there, and then you're straight through. Anyway, so defenders need to focus on strong security controls and effective placement. And then also actually respond to the attacks as they're happening. So don't just get attacked and then, give up. And then also continue to test and monitor the controls. So when we look at this in a bit more detail and see it as an actual real-life example of how this could work, we have an attacker trying to get access to an environment. They see that they've got the good intrusion prevention system there. We've got DLP at the barrier using some kind of appliance maybe. And what happens next is they say, well, I don't really know what's behind this, but I don't know what's behind the other way either. So if I do like if I send a phishing email to an admin, for example, if I send a phishing email to an admin and they check it on their admin workstation, then maybe they've got a password spreadsheet on their device which contains password XSX. It's got all the passwords for the entire environment, so they're straight in. So that's one way in. Now that's what the attacker would do, really, if they could. They've got this fog of war, so they don't really know what to do next. But attackers in general aren't necessarily looking for a specific thing. That pot of gold on the right hand side might not exist in your organization. It might not exist in many organizations. The point is that the attacker might not be only trying to get one particular goal. They might just want to get through one line of defense. They might just want to fish someone and see what happens. They might just want to mess with your company. You might be a big brand, and they might just want to ruin your day and get some dirt on your business. And we don't know what they're trying to get to. So by not protecting this route, we have a problem. So we can protect this route by things like adding in additional controls at the right place. Let's say at the crown jewels, at the goal that you want to protect that a bit better. Protect it differently. Add encryption on that in some way. Make it more difficult to access, even for your normal employees. If there is that business critical data, consider it to be business critical data. You might put it in a safe if it was physical. Put it in a safe when it's electronic as well, and figure out how to do that using DLP. Next, we can consider the fact that many users in the organization have privileged accounts that maybe they don't need at all times. Almost certainly they don't need at all times. There's definitely a time when an admin with global admin is checking email, or an admin with global admin is browsing YouTube and generally just having a relaxing day and not necessarily enabling some kind of feature within the tenant. So maybe we could ask them to not use their workstation for both email and doing admin stuff. So we can separate accounts. We can use privileged access workstations, which is, that's pretty advanced. That's a nice way to do it. Also, something as simple as payment and PAM, privileged identity management, privileged access management. So give them a different account to do their admin stuff and make them request admin when they need it. And then if you want to go a step further, make it need approval, so that when they request admin, someone needs to approve it. And if you know they're not working that day, or they're not meant to be doing that particular thing, then you're not going to approve it. So there's many ways we can combat the password XSS process and also protect privileged accounts. So a step further then would be to actually patch. It's quite difficult, but it is quite important. Vulnerabilities happen every day, and there are undisclosed vulnerabilities that will be maybe targeted by attackers who have been building up 0 days in their environment, in their attack toolkit. And so when that is first used, then it becomes a 0 day that's been actively used, and so we can actually patch against that. Secure configuration. There's many bodies that will tell you how to do a secure configuration in your environment. If you need help understanding what that is, speak to those bodies, CIS, NCSC in the UK. There's lots of different ways to find out how to do secure configuration, and even Microsoft itself within the Defender framework does give you that information. We'll look at that in a few minutes in the demos. There's 10 of them. When we go through secure operational practices, that's people, explaining to people, your teams, that don't store stuff in password XSX for obvious reasons. Next, an XDR solution, an EDR solution, which will actually work and actually give you some feedback when an attack takes place. Each of these products build up not a fully robust solution, but it builds a defense in depth. And this means that if one of those things fails, so if one of those things has a vulnerability, then it's going to fail. But you've got these other protections that can mitigate the impact of that failure. Okay. Can everyone check they're on mute? Super. A little bit of rustling. It was distracting me. Apologies for that. Not normally distracted, but that was distracting me. So next, what have I got? Oh, a demo. Good. Any questions, thoughts, anything in chat yet about this kind of defense in depth approach? This kind of concept of layering on security rather than just picking a thing that you hope will do everything. Any thoughts? Trying to find chat now.
So Dean, is this goes to the zero trust approach and compliance model as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's not focusing on any of the areas of zero trust in particular, but zero trust covers things like intrusion prevention, privileged accounts. The idea that it's zero trust, assume breach, right? So assume that your XDR solution or your EDR solution has failed to protect your endpoint, and you now have some way for the attacker to get a foothold in the environment. Assume that, and therefore don't let people store passwords in password XLSX, right? It is kind of covering that zero trust framework. It's all built on zero trust if you look at the underlying concept. Yeah. Yes, thanks, Gary.
Cool. Kind of approach towards that, but these are the elements required to meet that goal.
Essentially, yes.
Thanks, Dean.
No worries. Okay, so to the demo. Well, not quite. Let me move forward. We're going to talk about Defender for Endpoint. And in Defender for Endpoint, the four or five things, was EDR, Endpoint Detection Response, Web Content Filtering, Threat and Vulnerability Management, and Endpoint DLP, and one more, Deception Campaigns. I didn't add that one to the list. I also can't see a clock, unfortunately, so if someone can keep me okay on time, I think we're okay for now. Are there any of these that anyone would like me to cover in particular? Because this could take, I could spend hours just talking about each of these particular things. Anything that someone thinks, I really want to figure out what that is.
So we got a question in chat about Endpoint DLP, if it's actually part of the MDE offering or if it's just part of Purview.
Cool. So Endpoint DLP is specifically the function of DLP on the endpoint. It's not only included in Purview, it is part of the Defender for Endpoint PX, I forget which one, P1 or P2 licensing. But yes, you'll find Endpoint DLP. If you look at M365 maps, it is there on its own. I don't know if you need Purview in order to be able to use it, but it's definitely there as a line item in Defender for Endpoint.
I have a good question, not for the Defender for Endpoint capabilities. The question related to this Defender for Endpoint is different than the antivirus that's already built into the Windows, or is it something you enable that and on the top of this become the more powerful solution?
Sure. So Defender for Endpoint isn't EDR. It's an endpoint detection and response solution, technically XDR, but it's not antivirus and anti-malware. So your antivirus and anti-malware is Microsoft Defender. The full name of Microsoft Defender or Windows Defender, whatever it actually is called now, is Windows Defender antivirus and anti-malware, because that's what it does. It does the standard stuff that you expect computers these days to do. Look for malware, detect it, remediate it. There's a difference between that and Defender for Endpoint, because obviously Defender for Endpoint includes all of these things. And it's kind of difficult when you compare Defender for Endpoint or compare Defender against things, McAfee or other solutions that do what Defender does. They normally include web content filtering, threat and vulnerability management, endpoint DLP, all that kind of stuff. So it can be a little bit difficult to compare, but they're two separate products. Defender is free, Windows Defender is free and built in to your operating system. Defender for Endpoint is that enterprise level EDR solution.
Got it. The only reason I was asking, Dean, thank you so much, man. This is something I love to have from you, this discussion. The enablement in the client side is just the malware aspect of the Defender that's built into Windows, correct? once we talk about enterprise level, which covers these areas, which is a complete end-to-end solution that people look for, that's where the Defender for Endpoint comes in the picture, right? But when that comes in the picture, let's say these capabilities, do we install any kind of separate agent for endpoint, or is it just to simply enroll into Intune and then you can push the policy on the top of that?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So Defender for Endpoint in Windows 10 and later will just be an onboarding. You just need to push an onboarding package. There's no additional agent. It uses the stuff that's built in. You can push that via GPO script or Intune. Okay, so sorry, Gary. In the chat, we have endpoint DLP, deception, web content filtering, EDR. Oh dear, threat and vulnerability management. Let's go through it. Okay, I'll be as quick as I can, and if we run out of time, we run out of time. Demo. There will be some Ninja Cats within this deck. So I have MDE. And first thing we're going to talk about is EDR. So endpoint detection and response. You can't see this, but there's a banner popped up just exactly where I need to click in order to move tabs. And that is infuriating. Bear with me a second. Let's look at this, for example. I have a VM in Azure. It's running Windows 10 or maybe Windows 11. I'm going to use it for the demos later in this talk. But I was prepping for this I was kind of trying to figure out how I can show you what endpoint DLP might pick up. In doing that, I happened to look here and notice that because I'm accessing this via RDP and I've opened up port 80 in not 80, that'll be weird. Port. My mind's gone blank on the port for RDP. 3389. 3389. In order to access it via RDP, suddenly I start getting attacks. Start getting attacked, and these logs have come up. These alerts have come up, and this wasn't me preparing anything. This genuinely just happened on its own. So multi-stage attack involving defense evasion, and it says 28 accounts. So if I click on the unusual number of failed sign-ins for this device, this was, remember, RDP sign-ins, because I've opened up 3389. We have it showing that workstation name B15, don't know what that is. This logon user doesn't exist in my environment. This is a brute force against this machine just from the fact that I've enabled 3389 over the internet. Obviously, it's just a lab. It contains none of my stuff, so it's relatively okay. But this was eye-opening when I spotted all of these attacks just from the fact that I'd opened 3389. I've classified them as true positive because I wanted to keep it here for this, but this is what EDR will give you. It will give you a response into your portal rather than just it popping up on the endpoint saying this has happened. So that's the ED side of EDR, endpoint detection, right? So it's now told me about all this stuff. Now, from a response level, let's jump into the endpoint itself, which is this one. And from this endpoint, you can see I've got the incidents and alerts here. Incidents are sort of a group of alerts that are similar or against the same endpoint, so the same attack method or something similar enough that it gets grouped, maybe at the same time, so that you can group it together so you're not just inundated with alerts. You can see you've got 9. Is it 9? Enough there for it to be grouped together. You can also see a timeline. I'm not going to go through each of these because they clearly take quite a while to load. But I mean, it doesn't look good. I'm not going to use this machine in the future. But from a response perspective, if we go up to here, these 3 dots, and that's pretty hidden away. You know, when you look at it from a new user perspective or a new admin perspective, this is the responses that you've got. So run antivirus scan. You'd hope that'd be done anyway. That's probably, you're clutching at straws if you need to run an antivirus scan at this stage. You could, for example, collect an investigation package if you're sending it to a third party for analysis, maybe, or you're sending it to yourself for analysis. It collects all those logs and a package of information that you can just go through offline without needing the device to be connected. You can restrict app execution just to the core apps like Defender for Endpoint, for example, and maybe Teams, so that you can still communicate with the user if you want to do that. You could kick off an automated investigation, which kind of looks at all the stuff that's been previously happening on that endpoint, and then looks at what stuff happened since and new stuff, and it'll stay live until it's been remediated. You could do a live response and actually interact via PowerShell with that machine itself, or you could isolate it completely apart from Defender. Now, if for some reason you isolate it and it doesn't come back, there's a force release script that you can download and put on there. But yeah, you can do some response. That's EDR. It detects it and you can respond. In E5 or Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, you can actually respond automatically. You've got automated response. Hopefully that helps, and we are able to give more information in the chat about that. I want to move on to web content filtering now, hopefully, if that's okay. So with web content filtering, for example, we have in Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 or Defender for Business, we have this feature called web content filtering in endpoints. And you can see I've created one already called restrict social media, only to give you an example of how it works because policies take a while to replicate. But you could create a new policy. In fact, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you what you can do in this one by choosing edit, and it's exactly the same process. So for example, you can restrict adult content, high bandwidth stuff like image sharing, peer-to-peer, criminal stuff, all these categories. So it's category-based web filtering. It doesn't allow you to specify the exact URL that you can block, but it does allow you to do categories. So for example, here, professional networking and social networking are the ones that I've added into this policy. And let's see how it works. So if I head over to Alex, we can browse to LinkedIn, for example. And I mean, it's a bit harsh the way it pops up. It's like you've, I mean, it depends on the website you're trying to go to, of course, but for LinkedIn, I think that's a little bit harsh. But you know, the standard things like does MySpace still exist? Yeah, it's blocked. You know, that's blocked, and I'm not cheating by blocking everything. You know, things like GitHub are allowed as long as it's not professional networking. So it's pretty good from the fact that I just created that policy in a couple of minutes, and you saw how easy it was to click on the button and add something else. That's web content filtering. Threat and vulnerability management. I'll do this really quickly because it's not particularly interesting. I'll drop out of Alex. Threat and vulnerability management. So in threat and vulnerability management, so for example, I've got a Windows server. I think it's gateway 01 in my environment, or maybe it's host. Can't remember what it's called. Oh no, yeah, I've got a few servers. I've got gateway 1, DC1, and host A in the environment, and I've opened up the threat and vulnerability management dashboard and clicked on Windows Server 22. So what you can see is that of all the machines that I've got, 3 of them, there it is, 2 of them are exposed, and there's 40 vulnerabilities and 46 misconfigurations. That's not ideal, but you can see through the recommendations the things that you could fix. So for example, I could block executable content from email and webmail using an attack surface reduction rule through Defender. I could update the server. That's probably a good idea. There's 39 weaknesses found. And this is all in a nice dashboard for you. It takes just a few clicks to get here. Vulnerabilities wise, you can get to the CVSS score and the exact CVE that is being referred to when we say that it's vulnerable. What does it actually mean? And you can pay a lot of money for third-party tools that will give you this information and not necessarily give you the way you can remediate it nice and quickly. So this is the vulnerabilities. You get to see the installed device that are affected as well. There you go, Gateway 1, DC1, and host B. Okay, that was that. Finally, deception. Now, deception is pretty new. I think it's in preview, but deception is kind of this idea of deceiving the attacker, which I love. So if an attacker tries to access the environment somehow, what Defender for Endpoint can do, if you allow it and if you create the policy, is it can put stuff that it knows isn't meant to be there, but it knows that attackers will try to access. So, for example, scheduled tasks, or the easy things that automated attacks normally go for. Maybe not hands-on keyboard attacks, but automated attacks. So, for example, if you go into settings and then into endpoints and then down to deception rules, you have to enable this in advanced features. But there's a default rule. I didn't even do any work to get this enabled. There's a default rule here, and it essentially enables all the default stuff. So, for example, it will create some accounts within the decoy accounts within the environment, and by that it means puts them in the device itself as recently logged on users, so that if they're enumerated by the attacker through whatever they're doing to enumerate them, then when that gets some kind of login, let's say Lee, for example, then it will clearly be an attack because Lee doesn't exist in the environment. There's no one called Lee Pisani in the environment. So that exposes itself when we go back to the device, the incidents and alerts, by showing you a deception tag. So there's more alerts than I looked last time. This was detecting the use of a deceptive asset. So, for example, I think it was Lee that I used, but I tried to log in with Lee, and the assets users. Oh yeah, it was all these. Someone else has been trying to get in as well as me to do this demonstration, but I did eventually use Lee when I tried to remote into the machine, and it did trigger that deception flag there. I've seen the questions flooding in and the comments flooding in, so thank you for that, and also thanks to Dan and the team for responding. So yes, that's that. Hopefully I've covered that in enough detail for you. I'm going to move on because we are rapidly running out of time. Any questions on EDR before we move on? Anything pressing enough for you to unmute and speak? Okay, good.
I had a quick question, if I may.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So you have these deception accounts. You're basically creating a honeypot type scenario, correct, to attract attackers. But then, is there a way to automate the response for blocking IPs, or the next step is the one where you get the bang for the buck, right? What would be that course of action if you have?
Yeah, and so the fact that it tags it with deception for your benefit to see that it was the deceptive user that was attacked, you can do whatever automated response you need to against that in the same way you create for every other. If you're creating, when you're doing the response actions within Defender for Endpoint, you can pick and choose exactly which things you want to automatically respond to, or what you want to flag in Sentinel, and you can do different things depending on loads of attributes, including the tag. So yes, you can use that as a flag to determine what automated action is done. Yeah. Okay. Next. Oh. So, Defender for Office. Now, I mentioned things like safe attachments, safe links, phishing, and attack simulation training. I am going to cover these rather than ask you. I'm going to cover these. I don't know why I said I didn't have access to the time. I'm wearing a watch. So let's look at safe attachments, safe links first. And right, so not MDE, MDO. Well, anti-phishing. We'll look at anti-phishing first because it's right there. So anti-phishing, when you configure anti-phishing, it's essentially within email and collaboration, and you got policies and rules, and you got threat policies, alert policies, and activity rules. So there's some preset ones that you can configure if you like. If you want to go ahead and just choose that, you should probably do that if you've got nothing. The default ones are there, but you want to make sure you've at least had a look at what it's doing to make sure you're comfortable with the level of blocking that it's doing. Also, the configuration analyzer is fantastic to give you a quick check against what Microsoft will consider like strong best practice or weak best practice. And you can see what you can quickly change there. But you could always configure the policy specifically for what you want. So AntiFishing, for example, was the one I had open. You can go into here and specify exactly what happens in the event of a phishing attack. So let me show you that. Let me show you that. There he is. Where's my demo? Okay, back over to Alex's VM. Well, it's not VM for him, Alex's computer. And let's say we have, we've got access to his email, which is good. And if we look back, we can see that he got a phishing email at some point. So for example, there was this one here from Alan, a member of his organization, apparently from Alan, but you know, it's probably going to be phishing. And if you look at the link there, it's encouraging him to click that and answer a few questions from the security team. If you look at the bottom, it says safelinks.protection.outlook.com. So that's going to run this URL and this click through some kind of analysis to check if it's okay. If I click it, I don't know if it actually does. Yeah, okay, so it's clearly picked up that this link is malicious, and that's what you would hope would happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's what you would hope would happen. And so when we look at safe attachments, for example, that covers email, SharePoint, Teams, all the places you might find files being shared. So for example, here, I got another email to from Alex to Megan, and that has an attachment here which says 0-hour auto purge, so it's referred to as ZAP, where it's automatically removed the file based on the fact that it's got malware in it. And if we click it, it says it's all attachments have been deleted. So that's one example of MDO. Finally, you know, I mentioned finally on MDO, we've got loads more left. You know, I mentioned the password XLSX, right? A way that sometimes you can be caught out by a phishing campaign is if you do write your password in plain text on the desktop. I haven't tested this recently, but let's say, for example, Alex was asked by an attacker to write his password down. Maybe he's doing remote help or something. Could you go on mute if you are not on
Ports. Ports come in usually multiples of 12. You'll get a 12.
There you go. So let's say, for example, this guy's been told to write his password, and he writes his password here. And as soon as he finishes his password, it says it's not safe to store your password in this app, you idiot. It doesn't say you idiot, but it probably should. So obviously his password was correct horse battery staple, which is the most secure password you can have. Yet he's typed it in plain text, and Windows has picked up that that's not a good idea. That's a feature of Defender for Office, I think. Anyway, so it's not brilliant. You're probably never going to use it, but it's there. I found it quite interesting. Okay, so next, attack simulation training. Very quickly, I can show you what that is and how to configure it. So, too many screens now, though. In attack simulation training, we get to create simulations that we can send to users, right? So we know that they're going to receive some phishing campaign in real life at some point, but let's create one where we can actually make use of it and figure out whether they're susceptible to a phishing attack. You can see I've created one here called Credential Harvest. It's in progress. I've already created it, but I haven't actually seen it run yet, so we can do that together. Yeah, no one's been attacked by it yet. Someone successfully received the message though, and so let's jump in as Alex and see if he can read the message. So over on here, I'm going to go with, it was recently, I think. It's probably that one there. Yesterday, 10 p.m. And so it says, in loop, expense report has been shared with you. It's not a particularly, I mean, you'd be a little bit silly if you did happen to think this was a real email that you should click on, but you know, some users do. Expense report has been shared with Alex Wilbur. If you click open, then you can change what happens. So this is the sign-in screen that has been presented. So I'm going to just type his information. And type in his password. And you can change the thing that gets sent here. This could be a bit mean. Oh, you've been phished. Luckily this time was a simulation, and then you get sent to some training as the user, and that's probably the emails that are coming in now. Yeah, the security and compliance team are spamming Alex because he's been a bit silly. So that's that. Any questions, any thoughts on that? Okay, I want to get to the next bit, which is Defender for identity. And here is domain controller security. Really, I'm going to skip across this a little bit, mainly because of the depth I'd need to go into it. But that idea of honey tokens presents itself here as well, where we can create users or devices or things or service accounts, whatever, in the environment, and flag them as just decoys, as things that if they're used, if someone tries to log in as those, then that's bad. That's essentially someone attacking the environment or someone trying to use that as a vector to get in. And you can also identify high value targets. So I'll very quickly cover it because I think it's important. When we configure it, too many screens now. When we configure it, it's as simple as going to Defender for Identity and well, you can specify the honey token accounts by just tagging users that exist in the environment already. So create a demo user or a test user, flag them as honey token, and then if they get logged into, then you know that. But Defender for Identity is kind of thrown at you from right at the start with Defender XDR. That's inconvenient. My mouse has died. Give me a second. There we are. If we scroll back up to the top, when you go to Home, you can see Defender for Identity. And if you've not enabled it, it will tell you on the left-hand side that you should or you can't, right? So this Defender for Identities here is shown right there. And I mean, I have given away my password, so someone might be attacking my mouse. You can see Defender for Identity is right here, top left. So it is quite important from a Microsoft perspective as well. Do consider looking at it. It's very easy to configure. You simply install the agent on your endpoint, and there's a step-by-step guide. Not there. Well, there is a step-by-step guide there, but there's a really easy way to do it within the portal as well. You can see I've got 52 cloud users, 5 on-prem users. None of them are logging in at the moment through hybrid, and this graphic looks cool, doesn't it? So that's definitely something you should look at. Okay. Moving on quickly. How am I doing for time? I know I've got 15 minutes left, or is this not going okay?
This is fine, Dean. You have time, and people feel free to come out of mute if you have questions. Use the chat window so we can create an interactive conversation here.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. And I definitely won't be able to answer questions, and apologies for that. With the amount of demos and stuff I want to try and cover just to get through the A to Z almost of Defender, we're going to have to come back to you at the end with some answers to those, or if Dan can manage it, I'm sure Dan can answer the questions throughout. Okay, so next then. after Defender for Identity, we have. I forgot about the upside down Ninja Cat. We've got an upside down Ninja Cat. After Defender for Identity, we have Defender for Cloud Apps, which is also, I think, just as important as Defender for Identity. They're all important in their own way, but I love Defender for Cloud Apps when you start using it properly. So this is about, as I mentioned at the start, posture management for your cloud apps, for your software as a service applications, cloud app security as well. And so I couldn't work out. I asked ChatGPT to put the word demo in every image, and it seems to have put these characters here. I haven't worked out if that actually says demo, but that would be really cool if it did. But the word demo was meant to be in here somewhere. If I just open up the web browser and look at how we can configure Defender for Cloud Apps. There it is. So let's say, for example, I'll close that down and that down, and we'll look at Defender for Cloud Apps. I have configured Dropbox, right? As I've signed up to Dropbox. It took a while. I've made a video about it that you can watch later on if you like. It wasn't fun. I've signed up to Dropbox, and it's configured as an enterprise application. Something standard. You might have done this before, you might not, but there's loads of ways to figure out how to do that. Set up with single sign-on. So when I add a user to this, for example, let's add in. The loading screens always take longer when you're live, by the way. Oh, that's because I'm not even clicking the button. Add in someone like Nesta and then choose a sign. So what this has done essentially is given Nesta access to this application, right? So if I go to Nesta's account, there he is, and if I try to access Dropbox, you'll notice, maybe, that he has to log in, he has to type in his email address and password. Not great. So the first step for using Defender for Cloud Apps is SSO. The second step is actually provisioning the account. So let's go into provisioning over here. And now I've given Nesta access to it. We need to get him an account there. And we could like go into Dropbox, into members and invite him, but that seems like a difficult thing to do for every one of your users. So Dropbox actually and Entra support auto provisioning. So we can do that by choosing provision on demand in this case for the 1 or 2 users I want to do, or wait for it to provision all the users on its own. So let's just provision Nesta. Give it a few seconds. And in fact, in Dropbox, we should be able to see it. Add in Nesta here, and it'll just send him an invite. There it is, nice and quick. So it'll just send him an invite. So if I go over to Nesta's account, we should see that he gets a link at some point. Should see that he gets a link at some point. But if not, let's go over to here and choose it from his apps waffle. All apps. I heard an email. There it is. You're invited to join Dropbox. Good. Let's click that. Create account. And this is much better, right, than just telling people to create a Dropbox account, giving them a license and stuff, because that's pre-filled the email address, their first name, last name and stuff. We choose and agree, sign up. Now he's got access, right? Single sign on, so you know when he's connecting to Dropbox. The issue is we don't know what he's doing, right? So he could be doing something absolutely terrifying, like uploading a file, and let's say it is this file here, which is SSNs, social security numbers for the tax office. So for example, he may be sending this containing all the social security numbers to the tax office. He might have to do that. So we choose upload file, and there it is, upload, and it's done. I can choose a location. He's just uploaded a ton of confidential data to Dropbox where you really don't control it. Now you could have DLP on it. You could have automatically classified it based on the content. You could, but if you're just leveraging Defender for Cloud Apps without investing any time in DLP, you can still protect it. So for example, I have another account. So if we look at this policy here, in Defender for Cloud Apps, we have a policy management section. And in this policy management section, we have a policy called block upload based on real-time content inspection. And if I click on that and do edit policy, very briefly show you what it looks like. It is a policy based on the DLP category, and whenever someone tries to upload a file, it's inspected. And there's no, you could like say they can do it from compliant devices or whatever. You can put some filters in this so it doesn't affect them all the time. But if it matches any of these classifications, so any passport number, for example, any confidential data, you can block it and send them an email. All right, so let's have a look how we apply that. So we've configured the policy, but we need to enforce it. So in conditional access, I have a protect Dropbox conditional access policy, which is targeting Alex, and it has an app control session control, which forces you to use this custom policy whenever you're using the Dropbox enterprise app. Very specific example, but you can imagine how we can scale that up to the rest of your cloud apps. So open up his environment. I'm going to go to what's it called? Dropbox. So it's in his Waffle Dropbox business. And you can see right now, because I've got a policy assigned to him, it says access to Dropbox is monitored. I've not done anything different. I've just gone to the Dropbox app and it's changed the URL to firstcoffee.uk.access.mcas.ms, and it's telling the user that they're going to be monitored. As soon as you click that, though, it's straight through into the Dropbox page. This looks no different, but as you can see, it's the URL's changed. It's now using MCAS as a proxy. So for example, if I want to upload that same file, or not that same file, but a different file, maybe containing passport numbers with security, social security numbers for a July field trip, for try and upload that, it says upload blocked. So uploading passport numbers with SSNs isn't a good idea. It's been blocked by your organization's policy. Instantly protected that user against doing something really stupid using a method that you don't want them to do. So that was MCAS. There's way more than that you can do with it. And we could do an entire talk just on Defender for Cloud Apps, but I've only got 3 or 4 minutes left. So Defender for Cloud, let's jump down to Defender for Cloud. Now, Defender for Cloud, you saw the list of things that were available in Defender for Cloud. I can't do all of them. I'm probably going to do none, given that we've only got 3 minutes left. Defender for servers we can talk about briefly, I guess. Let's have a look, see what I've got prepped. So let me find this. There it is. So I've got something in Defender. Yeah, so Defender for Cloud. When it comes to managing your servers, it's possible to apply Defender for Endpoint to these servers by using Intune, right? So if you configure it correctly and you in the Defender section within Endpoint and you turn on security setting and management with Defender for Cloud for onboarded devices, and you turn on use MDE to enforce security config with Intune, maybe just this one actually, that's what you need. And then on the Intune side as well, you go ahead and enable MDE to manage security for your devices. Then your devices, and I haven't tested this, should show in the Intune Windows devices list, and there they do. And you'll notice that they're managed by MDE rather than Intune, because Gateway 1, for example, is a Windows server. You can't manage Windows servers via Intune, right? So you can't push policy via Intune. If you try to enroll it, it won't work. But we can still push the security configurations from Intune from Intune to the server via Defender for Endpoint. And you would do it in the same way you would do any other device. So you go into Endpoint Security or your settings catalog, you can push that config via the MDE agent via Intune. So it's a familiar construct for your IT admins who are responsible for deploying security config, but it's delivered via MDE instead. That's one of the benefits of Defender for Server. But I'm probably going to leave it there and ask if there are any questions on the A to Z that I've covered so far. It's probably like A to S, really. There's loads more to talk about. Any questions?
Dean, you may have to come back
Yes.
for another session in the future.
Okay.
Do you have any of this in detail, either your YouTube channel or wherever platform you put it on that somebody can access?
Yes. Good point. So I actually made a video about the Dropbox integration today while I was preparing that particular bit because I thought it was interesting. Just trying to build that. I create content as I find something interesting and stick it on YouTube. So if you have a look on YouTube for Dean LOE MVP, you'll probably find some content there that might be related to this kind of stuff. This is a smaller version of a talk I'm giving at conferences throughout the year. So there is a live version of this where I'm in person. If you can come up to any of the conferences that I'm going to be speaking at, you can get that list on YouTube as well. So yes,
And there's a link to YouTube in the chat as well.
Super. Thank you very much. But no, I do structured content on the platforms that allow me to do structured content. But watch this space for something that's coming in the future where I will be covering all this stuff in a more structured way on a different platform other than YouTube.